tidying can be more efficient than actual therapy, like talk therapy. And I know that's a bold statement.
I'm sure we can all use some decluttering in our lives. I like to admit that I have some very cluttered drawers that need some organizing, but I'm a very organized person overall, and I do not like clutter in my space, and especially in my office, because I feel like I have to have it helps with like my thinking and my focus. If I feel like my environment around me is busy, it makes my mind feel really, really busy. So I'm sure, and it makes me feel anxious and makes me feel stressed. So I'm sure there's this connection between clutter and stress. Can you break this down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I could not agree with you more, Samantha. I think sometimes there are people, it doesn't bother them, but also I claim that probably they don't know how good it would feel if their, surfaces were clear. So
Right.
there's an absolute connection between clutter and stress. And I really attribute it to, every single item has an energy field around it. And if we want it or not, if something is laying around on our surfaces, a lot of different things, they just catch our attention if we want it or not, right? So a lot of clutter comes down to too many things to handle. So every item demands our attention. If I always like to go back to the statistic, the average American home has 300,000 items. So that is a
300,000.
lot. Yes. And also, the average size of the American home nearly tripled over the past 50 years. So there's just a lot of stuff. People like to shop in this country. We all know
Mhm.
that. And at some point, we only have 24 hours in our day, and there's this sense of loss of control because those things also need to be maintained, they need to be organized, they need, otherwise, you know, what's the point in having them? So
Totally.
there's more things, but there's not more time in our day. And what outer order and less clutter creates is it's just inner calm. It frees your mind. If you have fewer things to deal with, there's less stress. So the more you reduce what's not serving you, the more space you free up, the less you feel stressed out, overwhelmed, anxious. These are all words I hear all the time: overwhelmed, anxious, stressed. And the less stressed, and I know you talk about hormonal health a lot,
Mhm.
um, stress absolutely affects our hormonal health. And if you declutter, and it might not seem obvious to a lot of people because
Right.
maybe if they say, okay, I want to organize because I want to make my space look better, but it affects so many different areas in our life, right? So the stress levels, your overall mental health, physical health. We can go into that more later, I'm sure. But yeah, the connection is absolutely there.
Oh my god, I totally, and like I said, I can 100% relate, and it's so interesting, like, we used to live in a condo, and then we moved into a house almost 3 years ago, and just that transition of moving out of the condo and packing up all of our things, all of this stuff, and then moving into a home, like, we were in literally, like, 800 square feet, and the amount of stuff is just wild to me, but it's such an eye opener because you realize I don't need all of these things. And then it was a great way to declutter because I didn't want to bring all this stuff with me into the home. Right. And so it gave me a great opportunity to really kind of filter through everything and be like, what do I really need and what do I not need? So that was definitely an eye opening experience for sure. So, okay. So you mentioned like mental health and physical health and all of that. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I I like to claim that tidying can be more efficient than actual therapy, like talk therapy. And I know that's a bold statement. I'm not
Hmm.
against therapy, but it really comes down to what clients actually are telling me, right? So
Right.
I frequently hear this from them, that this is like therapy. And I say it's because we are quite literally up in people's stuff, right?
Right.
So we're doing something instead of just talking about it. Again, I'm not against talk therapy.
For
It's all
sure.
great if that works for you, but sometimes actually going through your physical items that really represent your life and your past and what you're going through can be so transformational. And it's a couple of different things. I would say it makes you reflect and deal with the past. So there's this confrontation with the past and the feelings by making a decision about each and every object. So what I'm teaching my clients, it's really a whole home tidying approach. I really emphasize this, that this is where the transformation happens when you make a decision about each and every single thing. And we come across things like, maybe it was a hobby that they wish they took up, but they never
Right.
did. And it's more of a, you know, I wish I I was this person, but I'm kind of not. So it kind of hurts a little bit to let this go, or previous careers you might have had and you still
Right.
have those items. So it can be very cathartic being able to let go of those things, to physically doing it, right? So it's
Yeah.
even more transformational, I would say, than just talking about something, but it's this act of doing it, of putting this item in the donation box. So, and also gratitude is a huge thing as well. Gratitude has been proven to boost mental health, and gratitude is part of the method that I'm teaching. You should be grateful for the items, whether the ones that you're keeping, but also especially for the things that you're letting go. So I encourage my clients when we go through the decluttering process to say thank you, to or just think if they think that's a little quirky, and I get that. But
Hmm.
what I found is it can help with the transition process of letting things go, especially for people, and a lot of people are like that. They're very
Right.
attached to their things, very emotionally attached and invested. And then it's also the feeling of accomplishment. When you go through a whole home tidying festival, you feel accomplished. Like, this boosts your self esteem. It's good for your mental health. Um, and then lastly, I would say the choosing joy. So that's the defining question that I ask my client. You should make your decision what you want to keep based on, does this bring me joy?
Right.
And just think about it. I don't want them to choose what they should get rid of, but I want them to choose what they want to keep. So it's a slightly different angle, but I think it's such an important one. It's
Yeah.
such a much more positive angle that you can take. So just imagine being surrounded with only things that you love, that you enjoy, that uplift you. I mean, that alone boosts your mental health, I would say.
For sure. I would definitely agree with that. So what does that really look like? Can you explain that? And like where do you even start with somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the questions I get asked the most. How do I even start, right? But I want to quickly run. So it's two-part, I would say. So the method I'm teaching, the KonMari method, it has 6 principles that I'm trying to follow. And then I have my own kind of framework that I'm using with my clients. So let me go over this so it gets more clear on how I help people.
For sure.
So the methods principle are: number one is envision your ideal lifestyle, envision your ideal life. So we always start with the vision first before we dive into anything, because it really helps throughout the process. Because when people have trouble deciding on something, I ask them, would this fit into your vision? Like, really be very specific. I ask very specific questions. So that's the first thing. Envision your ideal lifestyle. Another principle is to commit to tidying up completely. So that goes back to the whole home approach that I'm teaching, that the method is all about, because I find this so beneficial doing it from the ground up, doing everything, because I see people fall off if you only fold your clothes or tidy your clothes, things
Right.
go back to shambles very, very easily.
Very
But
quickly.
if you,
Yep.
yes, if you do your whole home, something shifts in your mindset, and you have a greater success rate of actually keeping and maintaining a tidy home if you go through your whole home, through all of the belongings you have.
Right.
The next principle is tidy by category, not by location. So that's also a very defining factor of this method. When I always compare, what I do is a little bit different than if you would hire a traditional professional organizer. And again, people have their own methods or working with people, and nothing is wrong. It's just different, right?
Hmm.
So a traditional professional organizer typically focuses more on, they often come in and do the work for you. And there's more a focus on organizing and making things pretty, right? And my approach is more, the methods approach is more on focus on decluttering first and then organize. So there's big focus on getting everything out that actually does not bring you joy, that you don't want. So, um, and in this approach, it's important to see what you have so you can make more informed decisions, what you want to keep. So it's beneficial to look at all of your clothes at once
Hmm.
so you can make a good decision. Because if you looked at only this dresser like one weekend, and then
Right.
in 2 weeks you tackle another portion of your clothes, you have forgotten what's in this dresser. And if you pull everything out, you might discover, oh, I have 20 blue skirts. I don't need 20 blue skirts, right? And
Right.
you would have never found out if you only looked at it by location, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Then another principle is to follow the correct category order. So we move through a very specific order from clothing, books, papers. Then we have kimono, that's the Japanese term for miscellaneous items. And of course, we break it down further. Also, if people are interested, I have a category checklist with like a very detailed subcategory list. If they want to try it on their own, I'm sure we can include that in the show notes. And
Totally.
the last category is mementos, sentimental items. So the idea is you start with something easy. So clothing is supposed to be the easiest category because
Right.
you are used to making decisions about clothing every single day. So you're kind of used to picking out clothes and making decisions about them. And then it's also a very defined category. So we know what a clothing item is. So it's really easy to gather. Once we get into the miscellaneous, it becomes a little bit more gray and we have to
For
work on
sure.
defining those categories. And people have the most trouble with memento sentimental items because, there's a lot of emotional attachments to things. So
Of
that's
course.
kind of the category order that we work through. And then another principle is that the first step should always be the decision making. And then the second step should be the organizing. So, and I know sometimes people, and I make this mistake sometimes myself, when you're in the decluttering phase, you're in the decluttering step, and you're already thinking ahead, oh, how am I going to organize this? What kind of
Right.
bins should I buy, right? But I'm like, nope, hold your horses. Don't waste your brain energy because you haven't finished decluttering yet. And you might not even need anything. You might not even end up with a lot of clothes or books or anything.
Right.
So always kind of separate those steps. Um, and then the last principle is to only keep what sparks joy. So that's really the only question that I ask my clients. And that's the deciding factor on what they should keep or not keep.